Seems fair to me. Fair decision. Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it. That's like any reason.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of 9PBS.
Sunshine came softly through my window today. Beautiful day. Hey, I'm Alvin Reid sitting in for Charlie Brennan on Donnybrook. Charlie and his friends had some business at the Capitol today. I don't know what that was all about, but he could not be here. But Joe Holleman is sitting in, I guess, for me, and I'm sitting in for Charlie. So let's introduce the entire panel here. We'll start with Wendy Wiese from KTRS. She runs the place and has her own show. A founder, Bill McClellan, St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist, an all-around good guy, other than that Chicago Cubs kind of stuff. Another founder, Ray Hartmann, writing for the Riverfront Times and rawstory.com. And Joe Holleman, as before mentioned, from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Well, Tashara Jones versus Kara Spencer is the race coming up in April for the mayor's office. And Joe, from the numbers, who do you see kind of being as the favorite, and where do we go from here?
I would probably have to say Tashara Jones is the favorite because of citywide name recognition, treasurer over an alderman, but I think it's going to be a close race. I think it's a very interesting race. I think the elimination of Lewis Reed, for one, which would pretty much, I would think, mark the end of Lewis Reed's attempts to become the mayor of St. Louis. But who knows? The other thing is I think it erased a couple of arguments that I saw setting up if one believed it was going to be Reed versus Jones because of recognition. Then you had the establishment versus progressive, and you had the gender difference. Those are gone when you have Kara Spencer and Tashara Jones. So I think it's going to be a real close race. I think that Tashara Jones probably will draw more votes from a variety of wards, but I think that Kara Spencer, it showed in the breakdown of this primary, that in the heavy turnout wards in St. Louis, Spencer did extremely well. So I think it's a coin flip.
Well, Joe, one question I have on it, and reading Mark Schlinkman's story and looking at the map today, is, race is always present all the time. And Kara Spencer didn't seem to do well at all in the North wards. And I can't think of any prominent Black support she has. So how is she going to be able to compete with Tashara Jones?
Well, and I think it comes from those heavy turnouts in white wards, the 12th, the 14th, the 16th in South St. Louis. The thing is, and from covering City Hall for years, you have to get out of your mind as to how many wards you win doesn't matter. It's how many votes you get. And so you can win 4 or 5 wards and still win an election, and people have done it before. That's not to say that now that it's down to 2, I think the first race, there was a little confusion voting wise when people were like, well, do I vote for these 2? Do I vote for 3? Do I only vote for 1? Now we're back to what everybody understands. It's A versus B. And I think that.
Well, and with Lewis Reed removed from the equation, I think another really interesting component here is how progressive, because we know how progressive these 2 candidates are. And I think if they are viewed, if one maybe over the other is viewed as less progressive, what impact is that going to have on the turnout in those wards that you mentioned, Joe? It's going to be a fascinating race to watch.
Well, I want to say, I think it's going to make that point that this, first of all, Tuesday was a great night for progressives. It clearly was. So Tony Messer did a column about it, just sort of pushing the old guard away. But the interesting thing going forward with Tashara and Kara being so similar on a lot of issues, Oh, by the way, one of the things really exciting would be a debate. And I understand Channel 9's having one on March 30th, the week before the election. And that's going to be really interesting to watch. But at the end of the day, this election very well could be decided. And I agree with Joe that it's going to be competitive by people who aren't progressive. So the question is like what you were talking about, Bill. Lewis Reed's voters are most likely going to vote for somebody. And a lot of them are African Americans. And I don't think African Americans are a monolith in terms of how they make decisions in the city. So I don't know. I think it's interesting that the winner is probably going to be, very possibly going to be, who does best with the people that would have voted for neither of them in the first round.
And I also think you can't forget that Anthony Jones, and also ran in this race, that was close to 7,000 votes.
Right.
Now, that's for a person who identified as a Republican. So the question is those 7,000 people, it wasn't some move on the Republicans in the city's part to think they were going to take over the mayor's office, but you had close to 7,000 people vote for the person who was identified as a Republican.
And they're probably going to vote this
those votes.
Yeah.
All right, I got a question.
Exactly.
I got a question.
Where is Lewis Reed at? I mean, look, it's not like he's not used to getting beat in the mayoral primary. It happens every 4 years. But where did he go? Is he brokering a deal with Kara Spencer's folks? Because on the debate, I guess a couple of weeks ago, he said he would rather see Tashara than Kara be the mayor. But he's been suspiciously quiet. What's going on with him? Anybody got any answer to that?
I'll say this. First of all, I want to say one thing, and that is we left out one of the real big questions is where does the business community go? I can't remember a mayoral election, and that goes back decades, where the business community didn't have somebody they wanted to be behind. And these are two people that the business community didn't want. They were behind Lewis Reed. And so it's going to be really interesting to watch where the money goes in the next 5 weeks.
I think Lewis Reed, on what you were saying, Alvin, I think he's, I would hope that he's getting accustomed to being the president of the board of aldermen.
But that's not nothing. I mean, that's
right. Exactly.
He's still very viable in a weak mayor system.
And it's a race that he's shown he can win even after losing a mayor's race.
Exactly. He's not
going
anywhere.
He's a young man. Things change.
Yeah.
He could still end up being the prom king. He is a young man. He could win it one day.
That is true. I think time is on all of their side, but I believe time is running out on Lewis Reed. Okay, St. Louis County. What day goes by where there's not something crazy coming out of St. Louis County? Now, this time, a lot of it is coming from the police department. Once again, the chief, Mary Barton, says, remember what I told you to forget. Now, all that about no systemic racism. Now it's, you better believe there's racism in the county police department. She tells the Post-Dispatch editorial board. And then David Price proves the old adage, when the going gets tough, quit. He's the chair. The department's under various lawsuits. The whole place is a mess. Ray, how are we going to fix the county cop shop?
Good question. I mean, it doesn't look very fixable under its current management, and the police board, who knows? I mean, Ray Price, I think he wanted to spend more time.
Ray Price. If I said David Price, I'm sorry.
Ray Price wanted to spend more time with his family, I think. Is that what he said? But who knows what he left, whether it had to do with the lawsuit that he could become part of, and a witness to with Troy Doyle's lawsuit against the county. I will say this. I know Mary Barton finally came out and talked to the media through the Post-Dispatch, but I think she keeps digging a hole deeper. I mean, the best thing she could point to for race progress was some very paltry numbers on hiring, because it hasn't moved the needle. And the fact that she was now meeting monthly with ESOP, the Ethical Society of Police, which represents Black police officers. I talked to Heather Taylor today, who's at least, she's their spokesperson, and she said they're not impressed. So just the fact that they're talking isn't meaning anything. I just think she's in the wrong job. I think she's found, I'm sure, a fine cop and everything, but I don't see this race problem. They pick, it's like everybody knows, I think that Troy Doyle should have been the chief, but a lot of people did. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, I think she's a fine person, but she just going anywhere.
Part of it is choice of words, and it was just unfortunate, though, because she told the editorial board that anybody who thinks I don't think race is a problem is misinformed. When they said, well, you're the one who said that, Chief. I mean, and now you're acting like we're misinformed. That's what you said. It's been a tough go for Mary Barton.
Joe, anybody?
No.
Yeah.
I think we've summed up that the situation in St. Louis County now brings back long lost days of city politics, where everything is a fight about something except actually delivering services to people. So.
I agree with you. And apologies to the David Prices out there. I did mean Ray Price, but I'm just. That's just what I was going to say. I was like,
I do think it's kind of fascinating that in days gone by, you would have somebody with a Chief Barton before a meeting with the Post-Dispatch talking about just this kind of exchange. And I don't think that there is any outside help in terms of delivering the message or putting the message on paper. When you are the chief of the St. Louis County Police Department, some type of this sort of editorial preparation you would think would be in order, because she kind of walked right into that rabbit hole herself.
Well, there used to be a time when the police chiefs didn't really need somebody prepping them. Like, Tim Fitch, for instance. I mean, Tim Fitch didn't need somebody to prep him and say, don't say something like this. And the old chiefs in the city that I remember going back to chief camp, they were just so sure of themselves. They just would felt like, well, I can handle these reporters. That's not a problem. So
it's on the same topic of kind of public accountability, it's just annoying to me that the police board in St. Louis County, maybe it's us in the media, but it just seems it's as elusive and as closed as any company board. I mean, in other words,
that's true.
It doesn't feel like a public, it's not just any board. I mean, I may have a bone to pick with the library board. This is the police board, and policing and crime is
good point, Ray.
Top issue for everybody in a city and a county. And this is our citizens board that represents 1 million people in St. Louis County, and they don't act like it. And
absolutely.
It's very closed. And I think
it's social media. People are scared to death of one misstep or one misspoken word.
Good point.
I agree. I know.
Okay, the last time I saw Eric Greitens was the day that the charges were dropped against him by Kim Gardner. And we were on the steps outside, and he was, vindicated, and it was terrible and horrible. I'm going to go on. And then next thing we know, he had resigned as governor. Well, he's hinting that he might take on Senator Roy Blunt in 2 years from now in the senatorial race. And Wendy, is the past all forgotten about Mr. Greitens, and he can go right ahead forward and win that seat, or too much baggage to win it?
Well, what's so interesting is the connection, it's there. I think we all see it, between Eric Greitens' trajectory and Josh Hawley's trajectory. They are linked. And to see both of these men sort of arguing over the table scraps of what is left of the presidency of Donald J. Trump is something to behold, because when you put all of your stock in a candidate or in a former president, as Mr. Greitens is, that's a dangerous thing to do. But he seems to be all in, criticizing Senator Blunt for not sticking up for President Trump, and criticizing him for doing something that politicians have done for a very long time, in terms of Inauguration Day, as if he were being disloyal. I'd kind of like to see it happen, but I don't think it's going to end well for Mr. Greitens.
Wendy, I think you're talking about the Republican Party that you wish there was, rather than the one that is, because I'll tell you, I don't think it's table scraps in Missouri. I think the Trump party is very much alive well in Missouri. And Eric Greitens, to me, could be a very viable, very, I guess, dangerous, I don't know what the word is, opponent to Roy Blunt in a Republican primary. I think that Greitens, with the mindset of this Republican Party, and obviously I actually like Roy Blunt personally, even as I disagree with him. And I think he's the kind of Republican, if left to his own devices, we need in the country. But I think Eric Greitens would have a very real chance of, Trump came down his escalator. I can see Greitens coming up his basement steps, making a big announcement. But it would be very dramatic. But I think that he could give Roy Blunt a very serious primary challenge in 22.
I basically think that Eric Greitens has achieved exactly what he wanted. We're talking about Eric Greitens. Sure, he can run. If he's not prohibited from run, personally, as a reporter, I would love to.
Well, we all would.
There's all that background that you can just keep bringing up. I mean, so from that selfish point of view, gosh, I hope he runs. And I also think, too, I really have a problem when people start talking about the presidential race of 2024, and we've just started 2021. They say overnight's a long time in politics. What's so 3.5 years? And where was Donald Trump 3.5 years before he won? Nobody even thought of him. So is Holly out? No. Is Greitens out? No. It doesn't mean they're in. Can the Republican Party at some point after the dust settles say, gee, we wouldn't want a guy like Roy Blunt, who's a chairman of a committee. We don't want to lose him. And they come to their senses. But I don't think we can make that decision or that determination, 2 months after the election? Sure, there's still the Trump hang on. Where's it going to be 2 years from now? I think is more indicative of where the Trumps and the Greitens and the Hollies of the world will be. Not to say they won't go for it. Absolutely. If there's nothing legally prohibiting them from doing it, they can go for any office they want. I just think it's way too early to tell, and I think Mr. Greitens is probably benefiting in his side endeavors with being mentioned as a potential candidate. So,
it is kind of startling to think that we could have Senators Josh Hawley and Eric Greitens. I hate to be, old-fashioned. I'm thinking of the old days, the Eagleton, Danforth, but we could have Josh Hawley and Eric Greitens. And my daughter, who's very liberal and knows that I voted for Roy Blunt last time, said to me, Dad, who would ever think that her could be rooting for Roy Blunt and also think Liz Cheney's a heck of a person? I mean, it's a strange world we're living in.
Well, and let's not lose sight of the fact that Michael Madigan was the Illinois House Speaker for 180 years.
1,000 years.
So let's not be surprised about anything that happens in politics.
And I tell you, not to belabor that, but boy, he left in the middle of the night. Nobody knew it. It was all out there, but he just okay, I'm done. Nothing to see here other than I'm quitting. All right. Hey, Josh Hawley's name came up. Now, he spoke last weekend at the CPAC convention, gave a speech. All that was missing were the axe handles and the pillowcases. But he only got about 3% in the presidential poll of those that, were in that poll down that way. The same amount as Tucker Carlson and I guess Ted Cruz. Is it over for Josh Hawley nationally? Is he just kind of our senator now, or as Joe said, you can't count him out yet. Bill, what do you think about that?
Well, I agree with Joe. It's a little early to talk about 2024, but I think Josh Hawley sees himself in a pretty good position. The race has just begun, and while we're saying that he only got 3%, there was Trump way up here, and then Governor DeSantis, who was in Florida here, and then the next tier was 3%. So Josh Hawley figures, his name is in there and he'll do whatever it takes. You can't, it'd be a real mistake to count Josh Hawley out of anything.
I agree with Bill. And remember, this is the GOP queue now. And you cannot predict. I mean, as heinous as what I thought he said was, you got to consider the audience. And everybody's still having trouble figuring out how Trump is able to do this and how they're able to keep their spell But every time somebody speaks up against him, look at Mitch McConnell. He basically called for him to be criminally prosecuted after the impeachment on the floor of the Senate. And then last week he was saying, but of course he'd vote for him if he's a candidate. I mean, it's just, I don't agree with Joe about the Senate race. In other words, I think it's not too far off to talk about, and I know you wouldn't say it, but I agree with Joe about 24. It's way too early. It's not too early to talk about the 22 Senate race because that's coming up. That will be starting later this year.
Well, I don't have that. And I think the big question is when people, looking at it from the other side, which also when people say, I can't believe these candidates, I think somehow that call it liberal, call it progressive, call it the Democrats, seem to just kind of ignore the fact that generally speaking, half the country doesn't agree with them. And that's a fact that nobody wants to talk about. It's like, how crazy is that other half? Half the country doesn't agree with you. And other than throwing Donald Trump out, the last election sort of showed that with the no blue wave in that. And so everybody goes, I just don't see how he does it. Well, maybe it's because half the country doesn't agree with the liberal progressive agenda. I think the answer is crystal clear.
But no, wait a minute, Joe.
I still think, go ahead, Alvin.
Go ahead, Wendy. Go ahead.
No, I still think it was surprising. And I'm not as optimistic about Hawley's chances, which means absolutely nothing, but that he only received 3% at CPAC after January 6th. And the high visibility that he had, unless there are still some rhinos, meandering around a CPAC gathering, I would have thought after January 6th that he would have done better than that at CPAC.
And see, I think that Hawley, much like Greitens might be in the Senate race, if he were to get the nomination, I don't think he's going to, but he's not impossible, but he would be much more beatable for the Democrats than a normal person. I mean, there's no question. And I think same about Greitens in Missouri. I think he'd be a lot more beatable than Blunt in the general. So that's
what they said about Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, that's true. On that note, I will say this. 4 years ago, Donald Trump was about to give his State of the Union address, and Republicans had the Oval Office, the House, and the Senate. They have none now. I think the American people kind of gave a little hint here as to what they feel about all this ridiculousness. Okay.
And the pandemic.
Yeah. Joe, I'm going to go to this because you kind of let us know about a rare radio trade. So Mark Reardon is traded from KMOX, and Dave Glover, who I have the honor of appearing on his show sometimes, is now at KMOX. Is this a signal that the Mighty Mox is changing or the world is changing, or is it just everyday radio stuff?
Yes. Yeah, it's all of that. You've nailed it completely. I think there's a couple things, but I think from my point of view, being an old radio person starting in radio, I think it's interesting as to what the ripple effect is going to be of Rush Limbaugh dying. I know that for people who didn't like him and didn't listen to his show, probably underestimate what a powerful presence he was on radio. He and Howard Stern are probably the two most important radio people of the last 40 years as far as changing the medium. And I think possibly it could signal that KMOX, not knowing what's going to happen with no longer having a Rush Limbaugh lead in to Mark Reardon's conservative show, they move it to KFTK, which is a all conservative talk station. It's billed as such. And they moved Dave Glover's show to KMOX, and Dave's show is a little more mainstream, though it did touch on conservative issues because of the station it was on. It was more of a quote unquote old fashioned radio talk show. And so I think maybe KMOX is hedging their bets, thinking that once Rush, they get done playing the best of Rush or whatever they're doing to fill that time, that whatever they fill it with, I can guarantee you, will not be as strong as Rush Limbaugh, because I just don't think anybody would be as strong as Rush Limbaugh made himself to be. It was a unique radio phenomenon, and he changed the way radio was. There's conservative stations in cities now. That's all because of Rush Limbaugh. And so I see that as being a change in maybe the formats will fit better. I also think that when people see it, they think of it as being moved, let's say Reardon, from a station that dominates the ratings to one that doesn't. And the ratings show that that's not true. KMOX Radio is not the #1 station in St. Louis, month in and month out. That's not counting when Cardinal baseball is on. And KFTK Radio is right up there with them. So ratings-wise, I think in our minds, we think of KMOX as being this monolithic, they dominate the ratings. They don't anymore. It's changed. So I think, once again, it's a wait and see, but I think it's KMOX trying to maybe hedge their bets on the fallout after Rush leaves.
Wendy, your thoughts real quick before we go on to our last topic?
I think Dave Glover is the one to watch, because I know he said at some point this week that he was not, that his show was not going to change. And if that's true, then, you know, I think it's Dave Glover and the listeners and whether or not they can coexist.
Very good.
I was just going to say, I think that Joe, I hate to do this to you, but I thought Joe's spot on this. And I don't think anybody, there's no way that it won't impact. Rush Limbaugh, I'm certainly not a fan, was by far and away the most consequential figure in the history of radio, basically. And there's no station, whether it's KMOX or any other. This is not your father's KMOX, obviously. Obviously, I have a soft spot for our guy, Charlie Brennan, but and some folks on there, but it's just not.
Okay. All right. St. Louis Cardinals, they're down in Florida preparing for the season. Opening day, I think they're going to have some fans in the stands, but by time we get to the middle of July, they would like to have a full stadium. Full stadium, I'm not ready for. Okay, and I don't think Major League Baseball is either. Do any of y'all think that the Cardinals could possibly pull that off?
Well, let me say that I think that by the middle of the season, with the Cardinals solidly in second place, trailing the Cubs by 5 or 6 games, it'll be hard to fill that stadium.
Bill, I would say that I think it's a little optimistic. I mean, I'm fine with them being optimistic. I think whereas in October, we play baseball in October, which the Cubs won't be doing this year. And by October, I think it's very realistic in the playoffs to see the stadium full by then. I think July is a little optimistic, but, you know, I don't blame him for trying.
Well, Dr. Garza was very optimistic yesterday in his message of the summertime. I think it was just what people needed to hear. And so let's all be optimistic. The sun is shining, the cold weather's behind us, so play ball.
Yeah, in all honesty, I'm kind of the same way. I'd like to see it, but only, you know, the vaccinations are coming, Johnson & Johnson too. So I'm going to be optimistic on that. Now, Ray mentioned this, mayoral debate on PBS Channel 9, March 30th. Check them out. Just 2 candidates, and they're going to be there in person, I understand. So that'll be good. Thank you guys for hanging out with us today. Coming up on Next Up, Arrey Obenson, CEO of the International Institute of St. Louis. Thank you, Joe Holleman, for sitting in. I'm sure we'll see you soon. Thank you for watching. Alvin Reid signing off on a beautiful late winter day.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of 9 PBS.
And welcome back to Next Up. We're joined right now by Arrey Obenson. He is CEO of the International Institute of St. Louis. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being with us. These are very interesting times that we live in. So I'm going to start just kind of with a general question of what is our number of immigrants in the St. Louis area? And are they from all over the world, primarily from Latino countries, or just a general makeup of who's here in St. Louis from other nations?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. We noticed we coming into this position. I've been here since the 1st of February. And what I found really exciting is that there is a vibrant community here of immigrants. And currently, we're looking at an average of anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 immigrants coming into the St. Louis area every year. It has been a mix, but in more recent times, we're beginning to see a lot more immigrants coming in from the Democratic Republic of Congo. But there's quite a great mix of the immigrant population here in the St. Louis area.
So many of them are obviously, they are running away from inhumane conditions. What other reasons do people choose the Midwest and this city on the river?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question to ask, why people come. So immigrants come here for several reasons. Some of the reasons being that they move away from adverse conditions, and adverse conditions would range from, typically would be fleeing away from conflicts that is affecting their home countries. And I always say, I am an immigrant myself. I came here because I had the opportunity to come and work for an international organization that's based here. But once you are here as an immigrant, one of the things that we immigrants yearn for is to be part of America. Like, there's something about this country, about America, the American ideal, that everybody who makes it to this show wants to be part of that. Now, what brings people to the Midwest, or why do immigrants go to any particular place? Typically, they follow somebody who came here first, right? If a group, a family, a Sudanese family was settled here first, and the conditions were conducive for them, the word goes out into the Sudanese community and people begin to move, and that's what brings people here. And people will continue to come here as long as the conditions are favorable for them to come. I came here on a different circumstances than most of the immigrants that we deal with at the International Institute. But as I've settled here myself, people have called who are looking for jobs and asked me, how is it living in St. Louis? And I've also, over the years, encouraged many Cameroonians, because I'm a Cameroonian origin, who have moved into the area to work as well. So it's typically somebody leading another person. One good experience brings or breeds another good experience, and that's how people move in here.
Ray, Charlie Brennan, a colleague of ours who's not on the show tonight, has a radio program on KMOX and regularly featured some Syrian refugees who came here and they didn't have a lot of education, and they were put in a very poor neighborhood, high crime. There weren't any grocery stores nearby, and it seemed like just a problem with bringing refugees here. How do you figure out where you can put them, where it won't be too expensive, but they can walk to grocery stores and it's not high crime? Like, yeah. Where do you put them? Do you have a problem with housing?
Well, housing generally is a problem in the city. That I've read about this challenge that happened with the Syrian group, and here's what I would say: our goal at the International Institute is to provide services to immigrants so that they can be productive, get integrated, be connected to this community. Will that be easy all the time? Certainly not. But our goal is to work with the community so that as a community, we can provide opportunities for these new arrivals that are befitting for them to integrate and be connected and be productive with our community. That's what I, coming in from the 1st of February, is looking forward to. Again, I'm saying this as an immigrant that came here, had the opportunity to buy my first car at a 23% interest rate. That was totally a rip-off. I know better now, but I had no credit history at the time. So the challenges that immigrants face when they come here are very, very complex and very, very complicated to address. There will be challenges, I would always say that, and those challenges will continue to evolve. And if there were circumstances like that that arose in the past, that's not something that I'm looking forward to. I'm going to make sure that every immigrant that comes here with our community, we can work together to provide them the services and needs that they need to feel like America welcomes them.
Arrey, first of all, congratulations on your new job. You've only been here a month. You're president of the International Institute. I read in this guy, Joe Holleman's column, that your predecessor, Anna Crosland, had held the position for 42 years. And that's must be, I want to ask you what it's like to come in after, I don't think I can think of a time when somebody's had to come into a new position. I mean, you were selected, it's great, to follow somebody that's been there 42 years. Is it too early to say what kinds of new directions or whatever you're going to bring to it? Talk about taking over the International Institute after such a long run for Anna, and very respected Anna Crosland.
Yes, thank you very much for that. It's daunting to imagine how one could match up to 42 years, but I'm very conscious that my goal will never be to reimagine what happened in the last 100 years. I'm really very focused on what the future will look like and the role that the International Institute will play. So here's what I would like to do with the community. This is really important for me, that I don't see the International Institute as just an institution of its own. I see the International Institute as part of this community, and that we will succeed or we will fail depending on how we work with the community and the resources that lie within this community. I also know that the next 100 years will be very different from the last 100 years. That the people who come to this country will continue to change, will come from different religious backgrounds, different educational backgrounds. One thing that I'm certain about is that they will come. And when they come, the question is, how do we engage with them? Of course, our methods will change because times are changing and technology is changing. So for me, this year coming in, the biggest opportunity that I see is working with this community to develop a strategic plan for the International Institute, but a plan that is this community's plan. Why do I say that? Because I want the International Institute to work to build the kind of St. Louis that this community wants. What will our future look like? What kind of community do we want? How can we do it together? And who do we need to get there? So that's the one thing that I'm looking for, having this extensive engagement with the community to design the strategic plan for the next 3, 5, 10, 15 years for the Institute. That's one. Secondly, it's really important that we work to change the narrative around immigrants and refugees. The International Institute will continue to provide services to immigrants and refugees, but we really want to focus on the wider community. Why is it important? Because that's the only reason we're providing services to immigrants and refugees is because we want them to be part of this society. We want to integrate them into this society. So we can't focus on them and not focus on the wider society. People need to understand who are these people coming here, why they are coming here, and how much value they can bring to our experience in this community. How can we capitalize on that? Why is it important that they don't come here and stay in the fringes of society, that they become mainstream and participate in the development of our community? And thirdly, like every leader of an organization and thinking sustainability, how do we design a model that is sustainable for the future, that relies on the resources provided within the community and without, as a way to build the next 100 years?
All right, welcome to St. Louis. I talked to Anna early last year, about this time, about a year ago, when the coronavirus situation came up. And I talked to her and a number of immigrant support groups about the added problem of coming to the US during the coronavirus. So with maybe not a command of all of English, no knowledge of English, not speaking English, there were all these forms that were online and all this information that was on top of everything else that a new arrival has to deal with, as far as filling out forms, because we love filling out forms here. There was all this coronavirus information on top, and they needed translators. Has that lessened? Have you guys got a handle on that? How's that going?
Yeah, that's a very, I'm sure that if we went back a year ago and asked us whether we were able to go all online and do all of these things that we are doing now, we would have said no. What happened at the International Institute, of course, like everybody else, we had to lock down. But how do you lock down when you have people who don't speak English? When you have all of these activities that were done in person, citizen classes, new arrivals? There were 44 people that just came in before the lockdown. And when people come here, they have 90 days within which you have to integrate them, where you have to make sure that they have their social security cards. You have to make sure that they get a doctor's visit. The children have to go, they sign up to school. And all of this, they don't speak the language. And then there is a pandemic, meaning that you can have face-to-face meeting. So immediately, like everything else, the International Institute had to figure out a way to go online. So they developed a system of communication about that is using phones, where it's almost like the school systems use on snow days, but they're using that system. They were able to broadcast in about 8 different languages information about the pandemic, but also general information that was necessary for immigrants to be able to understand and also play their part in the fight against the pandemic. That worked very well, reaching out to about 800 of them. Even sometimes the city had to come to the International Institute to broadcast some messages that they wanted to be broadcasted. And then we also went online. So English classes, citizen classes had to go online, of course, with the obvious challenge that you may have technology on one end, but you wouldn't have technology on the other side, which we're beginning to discover that there are a lot of limitations. But that's how we've been able to cope so far, is taking all our programs to online formats. Sometimes we have to do even in-person engagement, where a social worker goes to the house and would sit outside, and the immigrant would sit on the front porch, and they would have a conversation, because that has to be done. Because also some federal guidelines demand that there has to be a visit to make sure that the immigrant is settled in the right environment. And you have to go periodically to make sure that they're understanding how to use the things even within the house. But obviously that we couldn't do, so we had to come up with signs that you could actually demonstrate to them from a distance what they should do, how to use a dishwasher. It may be normal for us, but it's not normal for people who come from different parts of the world. So my understanding is that it was a struggle at the beginning, even with the messages that we sent by text messages. The first, just about 30% were using it at the beginning, but now it's up to about 80%, which is really good.
All right, you mentioned, the past 100 years, the future 100 years. Let's talk about the last 4 years, okay? And this country all of us, I think, still consider it a shining beacon of light, but quite frankly, not welcoming to immigrants, not welcoming to people of color from other countries in any circumstance. Are you explaining that to new immigrants? And also, especially, you know, our state is not welcoming, and they won't shy away from that. Our legislature will tell you you're not welcome. How are you handling that? And are people that are new to our city, which also means probably new to the country, are they understanding that?
Yeah. So let me put it this way, and I happen to be fortunate to be an immigrant as well, from a country called Cameroon. As bad as it may seem now here, it's still much better than where I came from. So from an immigrant perspective, there is still the fundamentals of this country are still something that we yearn or aspire to achieve. Secondly, here's what I'm going to say about that. One of the things that I am not going to do in my position is spend a lot of time on what is wrong. I really want to spend a lot of time on what is right or what could be right. And in that regard, it's really important for us to, one of the biggest surprises that I found in getting in this position and 1 month into it, is that irrespective of what we hear in the news, irrespective of what the politics is, that there is a vibrant community of Americans in the state of Missouri, in St. Louis, that are extremely welcoming to immigrants, that are doing all they can to support people who come here, that they may not wear it on their political sleeves, but they're doing it. That was my greatest surprise, and that is really reassuring. What we must do is change the narrative, irrespective of what the politics looks like. That people who come here, you can label them for what country they come from. You can label them as, the most important thing that I would like the community to know is that the people who come here are human beings, and that's what really, really matters. And that as human beings, they're entitled to the same opportunities that people have everywhere. That a child who is born doesn't pick what country. I mean, in this country, we have a big debate about children who are unborn, and then not a debate about a child that is born and here. So it's really important that if we start looking at this as human beings who are here because of the circumstances in which they find themselves, and will be here because they will be here, they are here already, and they will be here, it's really important that we work together as a society to welcome them. And yes, I think that immigrants know, and not that I think, immigrants know that it's a challenge for them to get integrated into the society. But I don't know that it's that the community doesn't want them. I think that the community doesn't necessarily, those who speak about immigrants as being a problem may not necessarily understand the tremendous value that immigrants bring to the experience that we have. And my job at the International Institute has to be almost an explainer-in-chief on why it is important for us to have immigrants here to enhance our experience.
Ray, it's such a gift to hear you emphasize everything that is good about this country when we have, for a very long time, taken up too much time, and I'm talking about across the nation, with emphasizing all that is wrong. So thank you for that. The 9 PBS viewers are always looking for ways to help. Is there one area of concern that our viewers could make a substantive impact with the International Institute that you would let them know about tonight?
Yes. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. We know that in the next, hopefully, in the last 4 years, we've seen a significant decline in immigrants coming into the area. But one thing we're hoping for is that the next 2 years, at least, we'll see an increase in immigrants coming back, because the Biden administration seems to be building back the infrastructure to welcome immigrants into the country. And when that happens, we're looking forward to getting about 1,250 coming into the St. Louis area. And when that happens, we need to ramp up capacity. And what capacity am I talking about? We're always looking for volunteers who can help in English language, in helping immigrants even just understand going to the grocery store, what to buy, what are some of the things that you can do. How do you talk to your doctor? How do you talk to nurse? We're looking also for people with expertise. We're looking for therapists in mental health and things like that. So volunteerism is going to be, which has really gone down in the last few years. We really need to ramp that up. And so we're looking at that. Volunteers, we're looking for experts, and experts usually social workers, people who can help with therapies and things like that. And then the third thing, like every other organization, we're looking for resources. And what are some of those resources? When immigrants come here, we set them up in apartment buildings. We're looking for plates, pots, pans, things like that that could help them start up. So people can go to our website, iistl.org, and click on the volunteerism section and can support. Obviously, we're also looking for financial resources. So anybody who would like to donate, we just kicked off a program that is called Neighborhood of Nations. And the Neighborhood of Nations now allows people to support the International Institute with a monthly donation. Otherwise, we're also accepting donations all through the year.
Arrey, there are, of course, two categories of immigrants. There are the ones who come here legally, and then traditionally, for years and years, we've had economic refugees coming from the South, Mexico and Central America. And these are people who live in the shadows, and they're often afraid to seek services because they don't want to draw attention to themselves. And as far as I know, the Institute works with the people who've come here legally and are sponsored. Do you do any work with the people who have come here undocumented?
No, at this time, I'm not aware of any such program that is designed for the undocumented people who are here. I'm not aware of that. The category of people that we deal with at the International Institute are primarily three categories. They're the refugees who come here. They're immigrants who have been here not more than 5 years, so legally here, but have not been here for more than 5 years, because those people still need support. And then we also deal with asylees. So asylees are people who have filed for asylum and are in the process of obtaining their asylum. And typically those people are also registered, even though not legally resident, but they are recognized to be here and usually get work permits until their asylum cases are determined. So those are the people that we've been working with here. With reference to, I cannot speak of at this time about the undocumented, because as you said, typically they're in the shadows, we don't know them, but they're out there.
Thank you.
All right, talk about, when I think of the International Institute, clearly the Bosnian Muslims who came here as war refugees, one of the big roles that the Institute played. And before that, I think it was Vietnamese. Right. In South St. Louis, you're there on Arsenal, and so many, there was like, I think it was 70,000 Bosnian
You got
Muslims.
about 1 minute, okay? We're running out of time.
Real quickly,
So,
that number has decreased a lot, and part of that's normal once you get people resettled. But what are you going to do about the challenge of keeping those, in the case of Bosnian Muslims, that number had decreased a lot. How do you face the challenge of trying to keep the people that get here?
Yeah, that's really important, is we have to create economic opportunities here. We have to welcome them, we have to integrate them, and we have to let them know that this is home. For me, that's the opportunity that presents itself, that we can keep this talent here and we can build a thriving community.
all right, give me that website again where people can find you and find out how to volunteer, and most importantly, how to send you some money.
IISTL.org.
Okay. Well, you're doing some great work, and I know it's certainly a challenge. And when exactly did you get to St. Louis from Cameroon?
2002.
Okay.
I've lived here since.
And in your 18 years, your impression of St. Louis and the United States?
Well, this is home. This is home. I accept America for its imperfections, but I know that the story of America is that we'll continue to walk towards perfection.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, striving to be a more perfect nation, as we say. And you all are all perfect for watching tonight. It was Alvin sitting in for Charlie Brennan. Once again, Joe, thank you for sitting in. You guys have a great week. We'll see you next week on Donnybrook. And up next up.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of 9PBS.